chapter of the Virginia Native Plant Society, both members and non-members, welcome. We've decided to have meetings on January and May to include we'll start that next year. Usually we don't, but we decided with all the pandemic and not too much else to do. Well, some people don't and some people do, but we'll include those two. Mary Rhodes has already gotten speakers for January through May of next year. So I'd like to thank her for doing this so quickly in that. So basically, January, we're going to be listening to a Zoom about using the Flora of Virginia app that you get on your phone. It has a price, I think it's like $20, but it's worth it, Nat. I've used it several times. Then February, we're going to have a virtual tour of the San Diego Botanic Garden.
Ooh.
Mary thought that would be good for the middle of winter time. We go out to somewhere where it's warmer and kind of warm ourselves up. But we'll be looking at 3 different gardens there. And apparently they got over 30 gardens in their botanic gardens and that. So that should be very good. The March meeting, we're going to have 2 tech students that are studying, I think it's mosses and lichens at the Stadium Woods. And they'll tell us about some of the research in that. April, we're going to have a meeting about how to choose a good garden sign for the plant tags or other signs and that. I thought that would be a good idea. Let's see. Oh, Barbara Walker and perhaps Beth Umberger will be giving our experiences and garden signs, saying what things that we liked and didn't like, and I'll give you some tips to look for good signs in that. Then in May, we'll have Ian Canton from Wood Thrush Native, and he'll give us some tips on how to propagate some of our native plants that we might have in our own yards and that. So we've got pretty good speakers set up, so I think that'll be good. Let's see. We'll having a newsletter come out in late January, so the due date for that is January 10th. If anybody wants to include any articles, photos, anything else that you want to talk about anyways. Let's see. And it looks like we've got 12 people have items to share for this meeting. And I want to thank Jackie Brown and Nicole Hirsch for helping set it up on a PowerPoint presentation so people don't have to try to figure out how to show their computers themselves in that. So I'll let Jackie and Nicole work on this then.
I think that I am in the wrong mode here. One second. I don't use PowerPoint a lot. Jackie is actually the mastermind behind the PowerPoint slide.
Amen.
But I think we don't want to see this next slide thing. So let me, if I can figure that out real quick. And if anybody knows, shout it out. Okay, we're back here.
That view button up in the upper right-hand corner.
Mine's in the middle. It says view options.
Yeah. And then you want like full screen.
Slideshow.
No, not on, not the view options. It would be the view options on your PowerPoint. Oh wait, that's, let's see. No, doesn't work.
Jackie, are you?
Probably display settings.
Display settings.
Okay. Direct out here.
Can trust the professor to know this. At top middle.
Top middle.
Yeah.
Between end slideshow and show taskbar has
Display settings. Yeah.
I am not, is it in this main? I see display settings down here.
Yeah, we can't I think you're on a different part of PowerPoint than what Zoom is focusing on.
I apologize, y'all. Slide master.
I think I was seeing what I was supposed to see, saying, well, this was the meeting and the next slide was the list of presenters. Before you took it away, it seemed logical.
She's got the notes slide view on there. And I think that that's the problem, right? You didn't want to show the notes.
Yeah, but we might just have to roll with it here. But now I can't even get optimized for best of start. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, y'all. Let's see.
That's okay. Better you than me.
Can you close out the
I can do-
PowerPoint and open it again
Yes.
with in the full screen? Because
Jackie, it looks like there's a PowerPoint and a Google Slides.
So this is Beth. Have you started the slideshow from the beginning?
Okay, I think we got it. Let me see.
Yeah, sorry, I would offer to try to take over, but my roommate has decided to start playing World of Warcraft, and I doubt my internet can handle both.
Okay, I think we're good. Do we got it?
Yes.
Okay,
It looked
good.
like it,
Sorry
yeah.
about that, y'all. Great. So I will just introduce people as we go through it, and I will kick off the presentation to talk to you a little bit about, just give you all an update on the Plant Southwest Virginia Natives Campaign.
And real quick, while Nicole's moving to the next slide, if people have questions or comments for the presenters, please enter your questions and comments into the chat. And I will be monitoring the chat, and at the end, we will have an opportunity to hopefully address some questions.
Can y'all still see that?
Yes.
That's the title page.
Great. So, sort of exciting news and an update is we have had the opportunity to partner with Hale Community Garden, which is off of North Main Street, sort of as you're going up the mountain, up Brush Mountain, so right at the base of Brush Mountain. And it's a really amazing space. They have about 6 acres that was donated to the town, I think about 10 years ago. And there is a lot of community gardens happening there. People from all over the world speaking lots of different languages who are gathering to garden there. And so they have, oh, and here, Jackie added this great map. So you can see where the drop is. That is where the community garden is. And they have some opportunities there landscape-wise. So they use about 1/3 of that land for community garden plots. And they have been really open and receptive. So Live, Work, Eat, Gather, LWIG, is the nonprofit that manages that space on behalf of the town of Blacksburg. And I approached them about having a community-supported propagation space, particularly for native plants in our interests, but I think that master gardeners and other folks might also be interested in propagating plants there. And so the goal is, so here's a layout of the garden. The white line there shows the property that they currently have. It's right at the end of Maywood Street. There's parking. And so we are looking, right now you can see the areas with the blue outline with the hatch on it. That's community garden plots. And then in the red, with the red outline and the hatching, that is community gathering space. And so we're really looking at the yellow outlines and the pink outlines and adding some demonstration gardens, native plant propagation space, propagation tables, places to grow plants out. This property is supplied water by the town of Blacksburg. There's also the detention pond on near the top of the drawing that they do have a pump that they're pumping some water to use for some of the garden plots from that pond. Also an option for us. So I recently wrote a grant for about $200,000, and this is again Mountain Valley Pipeline funds. Fingers crossed again. So this would help fund the native plant guide and starting a community supported propagation space at the Hale Community Garden. I also wrote a grant to the Master Gardeners asking if they were interested in helping to support the building of propagation tables. And so I think coming this spring, that will be one of the first steps that we'll take. You know, last year, sort of when we were preparing for our plant sale, we did some makeshift table setups at the Urban Horticulture Center. And so it'd be really great if there was some permanent tables that we could use out here in the space. And even great beyond that is if we can grow out all our species, both in sun and shade and part sun. And beyond that, if we can host plant sales here in the future, so, and have demonstration sites. The grant that I applied for was VOF, Virginia Outdoor Foundation. And they were really interested in funding projects with forest, with relationships to forest. And so I talked a lot. At the top, you can see the northern part of the land is forested. And so maybe having a forest demonstration garden there. And maybe there's an emphasis on propagating forest species with some of the funds that we would use from them. But yeah, so that's sort of the update. And I don't know if any of y'all know Jenny Swanky that manages the space, but she's super excited to collaborate. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. So we are certainly looking for anyone who knows how to build and design potting benches. That will be first on our list. But there'll be tons of opportunities to work out there and partner and get this thing off the ground. So definitely look forward to connecting with you on this. And we're doing questions at the end, so I hope that you all have some questions or thoughts on this, and I look forward to hearing from you. And I will hand it over. Next, we'll hear about wildflowering in the Mountain Rodgers High Country from Carol Schwobel, I believe. Yes, Carol Schwobel.
Okay. Well, this was taken in October. Let me see. Start my. This was in October. Next slide. Okay. Well, in the fall, there were lots of species of native plants that we see everywhere all the time. So there were lots of asters, different kinds of asters and goldenrod, and the species of solidago. Next. We also saw a lot of blue lobelia, and this is Syphilitica, the blue one. And then I saw a lot of the Eupatorium. This was a wet area. So you can expect to see the Eupatoriums. It's a late flowering thoroughwort or late flowering boneset. Next. Next. We saw something that I was completely unfamiliar with. And so I have a program on my cell phone called Lens, and it suggested that it was a type of club moss. I have never seen this, and I did not get down on my hands and knees with a hand lens, and maybe Jordan would be able to do this, but there are lots of different species and genuses of this apparently, and they all look exactly alike from a distance. So it's either Lycopodium or it's Huperzia salago or northern fern moss. There are species that look just like this that are native to Europe and Northern Europe particularly, and other places in the world, but they all seem to look exactly alike. But they are found in the colder regions and forests of North America. I have not seen them anywhere around here, but Mount Rodgers is the highest point in Virginia. and it is 5,728 feet high. So next. And this is the club moss that I normally see. It's the common name is running cedar, and I believe it is a Lycopodium, but again, it seems to be a lot of different genus and species of this. They all look alike in the woods around here that I see. I had no idea there were so many different kinds. Next. This was just a hugely exciting find. And the picture on the left, I could not get my phone to focus on it because I think it thought it was dead or something. But it's a parasitic plant. It's called beech drops. And it's parasitic on the roots of American beech trees. It was about 1 foot tall. It was well branched, and it appeared to be in bud in this one. And next picture. These are stock pictures which I took. I got off the internet, and it shows the buds in bloom. And when I touched it, I looked at it and I thought, now that doesn't look quite like a dead plant, but it did. And I touched it and it was very soft and smooth. And if it's a dead plant, you would expect it to be dry and rough, and it was not. So I was just so excited to see this because I'd never seen it before. So next picture. We were also at a lake, Bear Tree Campgrounds and Lake. The beach itself had been closed all summer, and we found ladies' tresses, which I have never seen before. So, and again, there's lots of different species of Spiranthes. It's in the orchid family, and it's quite small. You would have to get a hand lens to really see the flowers very well, but I was pretty excited to see it. Next. And this picture on the right, if you go to this place, and it's in the Grayson Highlands State Park, during May and June, you'll find the pink lady slipper. This pink lady slipper picture I took at, let me see, the Smart View picnic area, which is off the Blue Ridge Parkway. If you've ever been there, it's a great place to visit, and you can see the pink lady slipper in May. I saw this in mid-May. So next picture. Along this trail in Grayson Highlands, we saw the gentian, and I've seen this particular one before. I think it's saponaria. But the buds are closed, remain closed, and it takes bumblebees, because they're big and strong, to get into the flower. Next picture. On another trail, on Comer's Fall Trail, we saw a different species, and in this one, the blossom is open. And there are, again, several species that I didn't know which one this was, but I thought it was very, very pretty because it's so much lighter and it's got stripes and speckles in it. I just think it's wonderful that there's so many different variations on this plant. Next picture. And this was just wonderful because it was it was probably 3 feet across, and it was just all partridge berry. And I've seen this so many times in the woods, and I've never seen it as a ground cover, but it was a complete mass of partridge berry, and I just thought that was just so lovely to see. Next. That's it. Thanks. I only was a half a minute off.
Great, thank you, Carol. That was lovely. What time of year did you say that was?
This was in October.
October. Great, beautiful pictures.
Yes.
Thank you. So next we have Mary, and I'm gonna butcher this. Ludwigia leptocarpa is going to share with us.
Okay. What makes every Native Plant Society person happy is finding a new flower or a new plant. And I saw this one at Claytor Lake State Park in late summer. As you can see, it has a very awkward common name. Next. First, a little background. I'm not very familiar with the Ludwigia either. The flora lists 15 species and only one is non-native, but almost all the species are in Eastern Virginia and they're listed as, go back, as rare or infrequent, except for two that are, no, the next one, the one I was on, the second slide. The second slide, next one. Okay, there, we're almost done. But there are two that are common and found throughout Virginia: seed box, which I have seen before with Beth Umberger up at Fenwick Mines. And then the other one, palustris, I'm not familiar with that. Next. The rest of the talk will be pictures, and I have Joyce Sims and Gary Cote to thank for these pictures. This shows where I found it, the habitat. A lot of the coves at Claytor Lake State Park. Go back, please. I don't know why it's moving forward when I don't want it to. I'm supposed to say next. So go back to the other one. It's like you have it on automatic.
I think, Mary, you might be delayed. I think you might be delayed.
I'm not doing it. I'm saying next. But anyway, this shows the habitat, and every summer some driftwood comes in. And as you can see, that I didn't find just one plant, but it's very abundant. Okay, next slide.
Mary, can you see that I advanced the
There.
slide?
Can I what?
Can you see that I advanced the slide for you? It's
No,
it's,
I don't see any advance. That's
It's
why I'm
advanced.
saying next. Okay, anyway, it's very short, so it won't take long. This shows more of a close-up. This was a Gary Cote picture, and later in the summer, it gets a lot of red on the stems and on the leaves. But what I want you to notice in this slide is that it's very erect. The plant is about a foot or so high, and the flowers are bright yellow, and they look like a primrose flower. And the flowers are in the leaf axils, and they're also very robust. Next. Okay, this just is to show the roots. As you can imagine, a seed landing on some driftwood, there's no soil there, so it has to have a very robust root system. Next.
we see the flower.
Okay, now the flowers. So now we get to the interesting part, the identification. I had no idea what it was. I was trying to use a book, but here you can see 6 petals, but I took pictures. It was in the driftwood, and the only way to see it up close is to blow up a picture. So I had pictures, and it had 5 petals, 6 petals, and 7 petals. So I was having trouble. So I sent a picture to Jordan at the herbarium, and he got back to me that it was Ludwigia leptocarpa. So the next thing I did was, when I find out what a plant is, I look in the digital atlas to see the distribution in Virginia. And this showed that it was only in Eastern Virginia and I'd say Central Piedmont, meaning Albemarle County, and 3 counties in the Central Piedmont, and then in Eastern Virginia. And it was listed as infrequent in the coastal plain and rare in the Piedmont. So to find it at Claytor Lake was pretty unusual. And I knew then that I better try to get a sample of it to get into the herbarium. And that's another whole story, how to do that when it's on driftwood. But anyway, then I called on Gary Cote and David Darnell, because they actually keep an herbarium in their home. And David Darnell agreed to make, he has a plant press, and he agreed to make the specimen. And Gary took a lot of pictures after I got the plants over to them. So the next one.
It's a close-up.
There's one more, yeah. There's just one more. It's a close-up of the flower.
Yeah.
This one also has, this is by Gary Cote, and this shows it close up. And the important things to take away to learn about this Ludwigia especially is there are 2 main characteristics of the genus. And one is that it does vary in number of petals. Out of the 15 species in the flora, 12 have only 4 petals, and 3 have either 5 or 6. But according to Johnny Townsend at Natural Heritage, the most distinctive character when you see it is the fruit of the Ludwigia, which is a narrow and cylindrical, and it's up to about 2 inches long, and we collected this before the fruit formed. So unfortunately, I don't have that. That's it.
Wow, very cool. You've never noticed this plant at the Crater Lake before?
No, it's only found, it's never been reported, but they have changed the digital atlas to reflect that it's been found in Pulaski County. Now, and see, that's what was most interesting to me was how in the world did it get there if it's it's always near a pond or a river. And so I asked Johnny Townsend and he said they were thinking maybe ducks, etc., but it could be boats also. And being a state park, we do get people from everywhere. But to see it so abundant, I don't know how, it's like somebody dumped a bunch of seeds up from above. It was just amazing.
Wow.
I think the fruit is actually there, the immature fruit beneath the flower.
Yeah, you can see that how it forms. And that picture on the log, that second picture that was close up, that did show the carpels really well. Not this one, but that earlier one. That's okay. We have to continue, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mary. Next, we're going to hear from Rebecca Polson, pollinators on goldenrod in her yard.
And that is a video that she narrates on the slide, so you might have to click play on the video.
Okay, and I think there might be a setting that will allow you all to hear. Let's try this and see if y'all can hear me now. Can you hear?
No.
Not yet.
She said this magnificent goldenrod. Nope, we didn't get that. Okay, 1 second. Let me figure this out.
And it looks like Rebecca has not been able to join us quite yet.
Stop the share. Isn't this Zoom stuff fun? Audio. And again, if anybody knows how to make the audio come through, chime in.
We don't see the slideshow either right now.
I stopped sharing it so that I could try and figure this out.
I can hear something in the background, that's it.
Do you all see it now?
Yes.
Share computer sound. Let's see if that did it.
Pollinator.
It has to start video.
So we're looking at this magnificent goldenrod that is just covered in pollinators.
You all can hear that? Is the volume all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to start it over so we
We're looking at this magnificent goldenrod that is just covered in pollinators. Lots of wasps, teeny tiny native bees, bumblebees, nice. There's a little tiny native bee. Oh, it just flew off. There's one.
Digger wasps.
Digger wasps, Mark says. There's a honeybee. I don't know if you can see it. Not that it's native. It's not native, but it's enjoying. There's a small wasp. A big old bumblebee. Very cool.
Great. Well, thank you, Rebecca, wherever you may be. Does anybody quickly know what type of goldenrod that is? Oh, okay. Maybe we can find out later.
Maybe canadensis. It's
Yeah, that's pretty tall. And these are also from Rebecca. And I guess Jackie said she's not here. We got some monarch.
She just wanted to share some additional fun photos from her yard.
The male and the female on the left, looks like.
And that was it. So now it's Lynn Ressler.
Oops, could you go back to first? There we go. It's not a very exciting first slide. Wait, the next one. Yep. So everybody's sharing pictures of desirable native plants, but I'm talking about kind of an interesting study, kind of a fun study that I just wrote up for a manuscript. I'm a professor, I'm a biogeography professor at Virginia Tech, and I spoke to the group about a year ago, and I loved it, and I wanted to come back. So, so just real briefly, one of the main things that I try to do in my research is to understand how we can explain the distributions of species and how we can predict species distributions. So one of the things that we often do is look at where a plant is and where it isn't to develop models. But in some cases, we also use additional information such as functional traits of plants or growth characteristics of certain plants to learn more about modeling. So recently I did a study with John Gillesco, who's in the School of Plant and Environmental Science at Virginia Tech, and some colleagues in statistics. This is really kind of him spearheading this project. I kind of took it with a geographic angle. And we wanted to look at different aspects of Toxicodendron radicans, specifically Eastern poison ivy, which is a weedy species that is native to North America, and it's native, in Virginia. And it's interesting, poison ivy is kind of an interesting plant because it can exhibit a lot of natural variation in its growth forms and morphology. So in this picture, the one with my boot, you can see that's one plant, and you see the leaves of 3, and you know to let them be, but it can be kind of confusing when you look at that plant and you look at each kind of collection of leaves looks very different from each other. So poison ivy is kind of notorious for taking on different shapes. Next, please. So another way that poison ivy differs is the way that it grows. So it probably grows in these 3 different growth forms to maximize environmental resources that are available in different environments. So the climbing liana is the woody vine You can see that one all the way on the left. That's with the very dense aerial roots on these vertical climbing woody vines. They can be, in some cases, they can be very, very dense or a little bit sparser. But then on the ground, if you look on the right, you see the crawling lianas. And that's more kind of like a creeping poison ivy. And in this case, we saw it quite a bit in our study, really one that is like characterized by stolons or horizontal branches along the ground. These are often hidden under leaf litter. And then we can also see poison ivy growing kind of as a shrub, where it really doesn't, necessarily climb. But in this case, we have in the middle, you can see it kind of looking like a shrub. And so these are the 3 different growth habits that we looked at our study, and we tried to determine kind of where, if they grew in different environments and where does poison ivy grow. Next, please. So this is a picture, just a couple of things to add about poison ivy, because again, I think it's kind of an interesting species. It's dispersed by a variety of animals, including birds. And birds consume the drupes, so the berries attach to the branches and facilitate dispersal. And you can see the deer browse. This is the base of a tree along the Appalachian Trail, and all of those were, this is a poison ivy vine that's been completely defoliated, probably by native fauna, probably by deer, but deer, rabbits, non-native domesticated animals like goats will also eat it, no problem. So next. So because everybody is familiar with poison ivy kind of from the horrifying perspective of it as being, this plant that it causes a lot of rashes, and you find it, read a lot about it in extension publications of how to get rid of it, but there's actually relatively little known just about the basic biogeography of poison ivy. We kind of assume that we find it everywhere. But as a geographer, I'm always like, well, I really want to dig down into that and find out what are the kinds of environments where you find it more in and less in, and how do we find where it grows as a vine, and where does it grow as a shrub, and all these different things. So one of the questions that we asked was, is poison ivy, preferentially associated with human modified habitats? And also, what specific kind of environments does it prefer? And so we looked at presence, absence, and also those 3 different growth habits that you found, that I showed you before. Next. So out of our study, this is a map we produced from fieldwork. So it's taken us a long time to get this publication up and running. We actually conducted the field work back in 2016 along a 100-kilometer segment of the Appalachian Trail in Southwest Virginia. So this transect extended from the Mills Gap Overlook in Botanical County to the Naday Shelter in Craig County. And this section of the AT was selected because it really has a number of diverse landforms and habitats, ranging from mesic deciduous and open landscapes and that characterize poison ivy habitat. So what we did was we looked at each white blaze marker. And if you've ever hiked the Appalachian Trail, you're probably familiar with these white markers. So for each white marker, there were 1,937 of them along this segment. And we looked for poison ivy around each, and we measured it. We eventually came up with a map that was produced here, where the red areas, the red dots, indicate poison ivy presence. And all of the blue dots, each one of those, it kind of looks like a transect, but each one of those is a dot. and the red areas show areas where poison ivy was present. So only 228 out of 1,937 samples had poison ivy. Next. So I'll just summarize this real briefly. What we found in these graphs was that poison ivy incidence definitely showed a clear preference for anthropogenic habitats, planted and cultivated. In the previous slide, there was that map, and each of the different shades showed a different land cover type, and that's how we determined our land covers. We could pick out developed areas, and we could pick out forested areas. Yeah, so the pink and the yellow, those are human modified habitats, so areas around road crossings and fields and pastures and things like that, whereas the greenish colors represented forest cover. Okay. And so we also found that in the graph on the right, we found that poison ivy growth habits respond differently to temperature and elevation and actually solar radiation. So in E and F, you can see that the shrub and the climbing poison ivies actually did better with increasing temperatures, and the creeping poison ivy did worse. So, okay, you can move on. So I think that what I wanted to do is just kind of kind of thinking about this. One of our reviewers suggested that vines, especially in the tropical regions, are starting to increase, and it's actually changing tropical forests, but there's been a lot less research about the density and the expansion of vines in temperate forests. So I think it would be interesting in the future to think about native vines compared to invasive vines, if those are actually expanding and becoming denser in temperate forests, because they can outcompete, they can crawl all the way up to the canopy and actually outcompete some of the native trees. So, so just kind of thinking big picture, poison ivy is one of many vines, but vines are kind of interesting, I think, to think about. So, and I see a question. It says, is this more of information? Is there more information or a paper? So we're hoping that the paper will be published. Hopefully. It's a kind of an excruciating process and we're on our second revision, but we're hoping it will be published within a few months. And if it is, I can send it out and share it. And a liana is a woody vine. Someone asked about that too. Thank you.
Say also, I'm talking to Lynn about maybe trying to get a more in-depth presentation about this put together that will have more details later.
Yeah, I'd like to involve John in that endeavor too. So I'd like to, it's just been a really fun research project. So thanks for the opportunity to show and share.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. It's really interesting to see the developed areas and the correlation with the presence of the poison ivy. Where that is. Great. So next we have Barbara Glazer.
That's me. Most of these plants that I have photographed are in my garden, not all. Can't very well talk about native plants without seeing the Monardas. And I know that Ian Canton did a really good talk back a couple of years ago for us on the Monardas and how they do hybridize and interbreed and all of that. And the white bergamot, this one is not always pure white if it has been hybridized with another plant. Next one. This one is also a wild bergamot, it's the most common one that we'll see out and about. Next. Okay, moving away from the Monartis. This one is soft hair marble seed, and it's named for the little black seeds, the little round black seeds that it makes. It's very common around the country, different kinds of, around North America, different kinds. The reason that I planted it was I bought it again from Ian because he had, in another one of his talks, mentioned that it grows really nicely with little blue stem, which is in this photo too on the bottom. And it reseeds a little bit. It's good for dry shade. It's a lovely plant. It's just a good texture in the garden. And I couldn't really find what in particular it was good for as far as being in the food chain. Aside from being native, it's got something, no doubt. Next. I was really smitten this year by common Dittony because I saw it a lot, being out a lot. The common Dittony is, again, for dry shade. It doesn't get very tall. It blooms in the late summer with goldenrods and asters, and it grows where there's kind of sparse vegetation. It's not a great competitor, but it's a really important nectar plant for butterflies, and in particular for monarchs because it's late. Doesn't get very high. It's pollinated by flies. It's also called many other things, but one of them is fairy skirts, which I think is sweet. And I did see a question about the soft hair marble seed. No, the deer do not like it. Next. Oh, this is one of my favorite ornamental native shrubs. It's purple flowered raspberry. And it is a plant that's really popular with pollinators. It makes a small little fruit that you can see in this photo that the birds love. And as I read about it to make sure I had my facts straight, small mammals as well, it said, in several places. It sort of needs space to spread. And it's not a real substantial shrub looking like plant in the wintertime. It defoliates. The flowers are about 2 inches apart. It does, or long. It does not have thorns. It's a lovely shrub. It likes to grow just about anywhere. So I have it planted under black walnut, which is convenient. And it's self-fertile. And, you know, I kept reading that it was not liked by deer, but I have found they will eat it, especially the flowers. But I have enough of it, which seems to be the key in my garden. If I have enough of any one thing, it can support a little deer browsing. Next. Goldenseal. I feel really fortunate that about 12 years ago, I bought one from Enchanter's Garden from Peter and put it into a place in the garden, and it took off. It loves where it's growing, so I have a really nice big patch of Goldenseal. It's not a particular, it's in the buttercup family. It's not a particularly important plant for in the food chain, but it is an old medicinal plant that Native American used and colonists used it. Next. Another favorite shrub of mine, I always called it Hearts of Buston, but recently I noticed that it's Eastern Wahoo. It's a euonymus. I've seen it, a lot of it, on the way out to the pollinator garden in Pandapis Pond, along where those kind of tributaries to the creek kind of run through there. It likes water. I've seen it on riparian areas. We saw one just last week or so, 2 weeks ago at Falls Ridge. I have one in my garden. The deer adore it, unfortunately. So my goal is to get it tall enough so that they quit browsing it. I put a little protection on it just to keep them from totally destroying it. But I had some nice bloom this year with lots of seed, and I watched a catbird eat every seed. Just sat on the plant and ate every seed. So it's really popular with songbirds and wild turkey. Next. Oh, it's also called strawberry bush, by the way. This is a plant I've not seen in the wild, but I'm told that in the 70s it was around here. I love it in the garden. I have quite a few of these plants. I do have to give it a little deer spray because the deer want to eat the flowers, but they don't browse it if I sort of hide it behind or around something that they don't eat. And if I spray it before it really starts to open up the flowers, then they'll stay off it. But it's really a beautiful plant. Next. Of course, we couldn't really go on any sort of hikes around here without trying to go to Potts Rail Trail and see the Bentley Orchid. If you've never done that, it's very exciting because it's just found there and very few other places, named after Stanley Bentley from Pulaski County, who wrote a book on Southern Appalachian orchids that's really interesting too. There are 52, I think. His book is very interesting. Next. And my favorite plant that I'm really going to allow to go a little bit more crazy this year is ironweed. And it gets really tall, but you can cut it off in the spring. You could cut it to the ground early spring, and then it will not have so much time to get the height back. Or you can half it sometime in May if you don't want it to be so tall. But it's been named ironweed because the stems are so sturdy. So it's really good about staying upright no matter what height you let it be. Pollinators adore it, and the songbirds love the seed. So to me, it's just a wonderful plant. It's a special value plant. If you look it up, it'll be noted to be special value for native bees. And it's also walnut tree tolerant. Next one. Oh, that's some sort of, maybe someone else knows. That's a flat-tailed leaf cutter, I think. I looked it up. Thank you. If you've ever gone down close to the lake at Mountain Lake, there are a lot of pincushion, these kinds of plants down there. I don't know if I've named this one right or not. And then when I looked at my photo, it says I took the photo at Waiteville. So when I guess it's a crisp pincushion, but it was just lovely. Next. This is Orangeville fringed orchids. This was with the black swallowtail, again on Potts Rail Trail. So the fringed orchids, if you can't find a Bentley, you can usually always find the fringed orchids, which are incredible. They're the most common orchid in North America. And it has some wildlife value, as you can see, but it's widespread and beautiful. Next, and thank you.
Great, beautiful pictures. Thanks so much for sharing. Love seeing those pollinators on there. So next we have Beth Umberger, and she's going to talk to us about stadium woods in the Montgomery Museum.
This is, we've done a lot of clearing in stadium woods. I'd say in the last 10 years with about 50 to 70 or 100 sometimes of volunteers a year. We've cleared maybe close to a half of the stuff that's in there, but there's still a lot more. And Susie one time was concerned when we were clearing, said to watch for bird nests. And oddly enough, I've only seen one bird nest in there, a hawk nest in there, and so does a raven. But and also now I'm starting to see little animal holes, which we didn't see when we first started clearing. So anybody know what that chute is? Because we were clearing all this English ivy, and I kept seeing this, and I showed it to Ian Canton. He didn't know what it was. I sent it to Tom Weebolt, and it's a fall shoot for a star chickweed. It's sterile, and so it doesn't produce any flowers, but I guess it helps it to get energy for blooming in the spring. Okay, next slide. So this year I found 3 new plants in the woods that I didn't know were in there, and this is one, it's cut leaf, grape leaf. And as it turns out, where we were clearing, we ended up in this area finding 3 at different places. So I was really excited to find this one. I hope I had that identified correctly. And then the next slide. I'm not sure about this identification because we have 2 apple native species in our area. And I think this is right. This is a beautiful little tree. I have no idea why these are not in the horticultural business, because I took some seed and I'm going to try to grow it. But it was a beautiful little shape to it. The color in the fall was pretty, and these little yellow fruits, what's not to like. But this I found, I've never seen it there before. I didn't notice it. And then this fall, I found late summer and fall, 4 different places that's in the woods. Okay, next slide. And this is Eastern Wahoo. You can see it's been cut back. I have a story with this. We had cadets helping us 2 different sessions so we could socially distance and have smaller groups. And there's a whole bank of burning bush that I wanted Fred to work with them on shovels and dig out because we'd cut them back. And Fred, I thought Fred was up. I was trying to socially distance, and I saw these guys just digging out this huge plant. I thought, oh, good. And then I thought, oh no, I didn't know what it was. It would look different. And Fred was. I didn't realize they had left from Fred. When I went up there, I looked at the leaves and I said, oh no, the leaves were different. I said, this is not burning bush. And they said, well, it has green stems and it's got the opposite. I said, I know, but not everything that has green stems and opposite it is not necessarily the burning bush. And it turned out when I got home and I looked at the berries, I couldn't get good pictures of berries. It's not this plant that I took a picture of. But anyway, it was Eastern Wahoo. And I didn't know there was any in the woods. So then I started looking carefully. Then on the other side of the woods, we were working the next week. And I said, wait a minute, Fred, don't dig that out because look at the berries and look at the leaves. And even you can see it, the other one had a little bit of winging on it and that's supposed to rule out. So I don't know I'd like to know if they could hybridize with each other. Maybe they've done that. But this is definitely Eastern Wahoo. You can see the leaves are bigger and the seeds were just like the ones that Barbara just showed us, those little seeds. So now I'm going to go through and tag the ones I'm pretty sure they're Eastern Wahoo, so nobody cuts them back or digs them out like we did. Well, what happened was, I don't have my camera on. So I went back on Monday and took every kind of cutting I could, stick cutting, which I put in my containers outside. Those are sticks that they're not only about 1/2 inch wide, and stuck those in I have 6 containers full of sticks from that. And then here on my table, you can't see, I realize you can't see. Anyway, I have a whole, inside I have hundreds of little twigs that I'm rooting, and they're starting to root in, and I'll put them down in my basement under light and pot those up. I felt really bad. I felt bad all the way home until I figured out, well, I could take those cuttings. Next slide. And in the woods this year, you can go on iNaturalist and look at Explore Stadium Woods, and I could not believe the mushrooms I took pictures of. I'm hoping I can get somebody to ID them for me. Someone had said they would help me ID them. I did take mycology from Dr. Miller at one time, but you can, there was Amanitas, there was Old Man of the Woods. I ate the one on the right, that was Hen of the Woods. There was Chicken of the Woods. There was indigo blue. There were all kinds of boletes and all kinds of gill mushrooms. It was amazing, the types of mushrooms in there. It's not good, that jack-o'-lantern is not good to have that one because that tree's obviously dead, but it's when you see that, the tree's starting to go downhill. And the chicken of the woods I found in 4 places. I found it 2 times in Stadium Woods in the same place. I found it at in Ohio when I visited my daughter for a week. I found it at Depot Park next to the oak tree, and I found them at Montgomery Museum, and they are in my freezer now. Okay, next slide. This is the Montgomery Museum. The upper part of the Montgomery Museum is has part natives and part non-natives, and I've gotten rid of all the invasive plants up there, the privet and stuff. But and I have lots of really great helpers here: Gwen Ewing, Sandy Witt, Margene Hirsch, and we've had other volunteers. One guy was Hayden was getting his tuition paid for if he volunteered hours. We've had neighbors that came, and it's been awesome to have. And we have the sisters and elders from the Mormon Church are helping us now. So lots of different people that help us over time. We planted lots of vegetables. We planted tomatoes and potatoes and beans, and we gave those away to squash, winter squash, summer squash. And so that's the upper garden. Okay, next slide. And this is one I took. This is butterfly weed with the milkweed bug, large milkweed bug on it. And so that's the whole purpose of the garden, is to provide habitat for the insects, which in turn provides things for birds and all to eat. Okay. Go ahead, next slide. Nancy Adamson said in the spring for people to be on lookout. She's heard that there's been bumblebees in people's birds' nests, and this was a bluebird that had fledged. So I went over to take the nest out, and I heard, and sure enough, I dropped it on the ground, and I came back the next day and took it out again and photographed it. But the bumblebee was making a nest in there. So I took a picture, shoved it back in, sent that to Nancy, and then not long after that, I decided to be brave, and I opened it up, and the English sparrow had nested in there on top of that. So I don't know what happened to the bumblebee, but anyway, so I took them and buried them so they won't come back. And I might have to take the nest down. Fred and I had an English sparrow that took over, killed bluebirds and killed the wrens that nested in there, and so we took the whole house down because I read that they're territorial. So I don't kill lots of things, but English sparrows are on my list. Okay, next slide. And this is a picture in the lower part of the garden. These are seed collected tuile plants. Bottle brush I got at Selu, just took my hands and ran across it and planted it, and it's a wonderful plant. If you have a shady spot, it gets seed around, but it's not invasive in a bad way, and you can see it looks really nice with other things. The Monarda was from a plant cell, the Blue Ridge plant cell, and the what's that called? World Rosenreed. That's World Rosenreed. The computer kept changing it to WIRLED. That one is I collected seed with Nancy Adamson. Okay. Next slide. And this is in the upper garden, and the senna came from Barbara Walker. The phlox was I was throwing away a crow's nest, and I thought, oh, I could put these in the garden, so I did. And they've seeded around and made all different kinds of colors. It's been fun. The front part is the thoroughwort, and then when you see Swiss chard, and off to the left we planted green beans, and they did very well among the native plants there. Okay, next slide. So I was thinking that these are kind of hybrid, they're double and all that. All these things you say you shouldn't do with native plants, but I love these doubles, and everybody else likes them too. And I told Sandy, who helped me photograph this, she has a great camera. And so I said, I don't think there's any insects in the garden hardly at all this year. And she came, I've only shown part of what she had, but I don't know what this caterpillar is. I looked it up one time and I forgot to look it up again. Next slide. And this one I took, I think. This is, I think that's a potter wasp. They make a little pot, a little cool little pot. It looks like they spun it on wheel. It's a beautiful, look it up sometime. And then they put their, they parasitize a caterpillar, put it inside there and lay an egg and close it off. But it's a little tiny little clay pot. And that's Rattlesnake Master. Okay, next slide. This is another picture Sandy took. It's just a flesh fly, but it's really pretty. All right, next slide. And this is one of my favorites, these crab spiders. They'll, depending on the flower, I've seen them they can be white. I think this is the one. I may have the wrong species, but they can be white or they can be yellow, and that's a jewelweed. Okay, next slide. This plant, I collected on a bank next to the road in Radford some squirrel corn, and I planted it at the museum, and then the next year this plant came up. It is not pretty. There's nothing pretty about this plant at all, but it's always covered with insects, and it has a lot of little tiny insects, and they like it a lot. Okay, next slide. It came up one year in one spot, and then the next year it wasn't there, and it came up the next spot. So I think it's a perennial, but we'll see what happens. I don't know, see it around. Okay. Now this is Sandy's pictures, and these are ants on two different plants, but if you look, there's two different kinds of aphids. There's green aphids on the left, and then there's yellow aphids on the right. And they're farming. They're doing their dairy, probably milking them. Okay, next picture. All right, so I feel bad about this. We've all done it, planted things that escaped and went away. So this is a drainage ditch that is 2 yards away from me. Years ago, about 10 years ago, I was working, it might have been 20 years ago, I planted this Metallicum. It escaped to my neighbor's yard, to 3 yards bordering me, and then it hopped a yard and went over here. I had cleared it out of my yard and had no idea that it had hopped into my neighbor's yards like this. So this is 2 yards over. 2 neighbors have given me permission to remove it. Water flows through here when it rains like a creek for a couple of days. It's fun working in there. Where the brown spots are on the right, I've cleared all kinds of garlic mustard. On the left, it's bishopweed, Metallicum, honest money plant, the sweet rocket, and I did find one native, a carex, that I'm planting low natives in my yard and digging this up. And the next slide. I feel really bad. I know that these little tiny little bulbs have gone downstream, and I'm working in Depot Park, so I am watching diligently. I feel really bad. This is my fault, but this is Metallicum. There's the clump on the right. I dug it out, and that's what's on the left. Just imagine the seeds. It's a beautiful plant. It's beautiful all year long, but it will go everywhere, and it is going to be a problem if we don't stop planting it now. It's still in the, Beck and Brady Bulb sells it, Plants Delight sells it. It's really should not be grown. I've tried, and I hope that if you have it, you'll get rid of it, because it's hard to get rid of. And I still, after about 5 years ago, I started working on it. I still have a couple that come up in my yard. And so if anybody wants me to come to their yard and help them say, what should I get rid of? Like English ivy growing up your tree, it would help us in Stadium Woods if you can get that English ivy out of your tree, because it's producing seed. Or if you have calorie pear or any of those things in your yard, please get rid of them, because they're coming to Stadium Woods and the native areas near you. And I pulled up in my yard and over at the museum gobs, I couldn't believe in my yard, of baby bittersweet and baby calorie pear. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for all the great work you're doing in those gardens. They're beautiful. So next we have Bruce Grimes, and he's going to talk to us about pollinators.
Okay. Am I coming through okay? I have a bad internet connection, and so I'm not sure that things are working right. So let me know.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I wanted to talk about some of the, and use some of my pictures of some of the other pollinators that are around. You know, bees are supposed to be responsible for about 60% of pollination. That's at least the commercial crops that people are studying. And flies are figured to do about another 1/3 of all pollination that's done by insects. So the rest of them, as you can tell, don't have very much work to do. But the syrphids, or flower flies, or hoverflies, if you will, do a lot of the pollination that the flies are doing. So I was just going to run through some of the ones that you might run into. There are various sizes and lots of genuses that you'll see around our area. This is the common drone fly, Oristalis tenax. Next. And this is another the genus, transverse banded drone fly. Transversa. Next. And Arbostorum, the European drone fly, so not native. Next. And Aristolis dimidiata, the black-shouldered drone fly. These are pretty common ones that you'll see around. Next. Some of these are a little less, but the name of this one, Eupeody locus, the large-tailed Aphid Eater, these names were given recently in many cases. There's a field guide now for the syrphids of our region, the flower flies of our region of northeastern North America. And so I've been using that to do the identifications, sometimes correctly, but I use Bug Guide to help me out on getting them actually correctly, and sometimes on iNaturalist, that's also a help. But you can see that Aphid Eater is what they're using as the common name for this genus, because that's the typical larval host. So many syrphids have larvae that are going to be eating scale insects or aphids, and otherwise helping to control plant pests. Next. So this one, I ran into it's either just long-tailed or the short-tailed Aphid Eater. It's extremely common. I ran into them early spring, and I think this picture may be from early November. So, you know, this one's going to be around a lot and all over the place. Next. Okay, this is the only one of this genus I've run into, but it wasn't around flowers, but you know, you take what you can get for the picture. Next, sorry. This one, lots of people may be familiar with already. The Virginia Giant is the name that they're assigning it now, but it's been known as the Yellowjacket Hoverfly. But locally, the country people called it the news bee or the good news bee because it's large, it buzzes loudly, it makes you think it's a yellow jacket, but it can't sting you. All of these are harmless to humans, and although they're incredible mimics, most of them are bee or wasp mimics for protection. But this one is the largest and the one that you're going to notice really quickly. And I've run into them all over. I've run them at Blacksburg Natural Heritage Park, all places on the Parkway and other, you know, just about any place you go, you can run into these. Next. These I hadn't run into before, but I ran into them this August, and I was very excited to have done that. And when I showed a friend of mine pictures of them in September, she said, oh yeah, they're all over my garden. So apparently they're very common, but maybe only later in the year. And then of course, after she told me that, when I was a little disconcerted, I started running into it just about everywhere I went. So that's what happens, I guess. Next. This one's supposed to be a little bit rare, but this is my neighborhood, so maybe it's not. Next. This sedge sitters are called that because they're thought to use the pollen of sedges and grasses for food. Of course, this one's on rubus. Next. This one's supposed to be a little bit rare, but maybe it's just in places where people aren't going. Next. This is very, very common. I got pictures of these all over this year. This was at Natural Heritage, Blacksburg Natural Heritage Park, but you can find them all over the place, and but they're pretty small. It's hard to tell from this picture, but you know, you're looking at maybe ½ an inch. Next. This is a larger one, and you can see that it's a very good bee and wasp mimic, wasp mimic in this case. Next. This one's supposed to be common. This is the only one I've ever seen. I saw it about 100 feet from my house. And It's got the spots in the wings. It's about 1/3 of an inch in size though, so you might not notice it unless you're looking. Next, please. The next couple are very, very common ones. They're very small, but they're beautiful and you can find them on flowers all over. Next. Next. I'm not sure about how often you find these, but this particular picture is from up on White Top Mountain. There were a large group of them, but I've gotten some in other areas since. Next. I had pictures of these from White Top Mountain as well, but this picture, and this picture is from there, but then I got, when I looked at the jewelweed in my backyard, it was also there, surprising me. Next. So compost fly gives you an idea where the larva may be common. Next. Well, this one I ran into down in Patrick County. I'm not sure how common it is around here, but the authors of the guidebook think it's an undescribed species, although they're still calling it tropical pushback at this point. Next. Okay, now we're going to skip over and just look at some of the beetles you might run into. And when you look at the goldenrod in the fall, you very frequently find these locust borers on them. Next. Or this species on a lot of flowers through the summer. Next. Well, this one got thrown in because I had a picture of it. It's another longhorn beetle. You'll see in the flower beetles, they're called also. Next. Now we're getting over to another group of beetles and the bug-breasteds. You know, I had a picture of it, so I threw it in. Next. These are, you might find more frequently on the flowers, referred to as the flower chafers with the, it looks like they're hairy all around the edges of the wing covers there. Next. Another flower chafer. Next. Sorry, next. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Great.
My connection's slow, so I'm not sure where we actually are, but thank you.
I think that was it. Thanks for sharing all those beautiful photographs with us. Quite a talent for capturing those moments. And I think we're skipping Deborah's presentation. Is that right, Jackie? She wasn't able to join us.
Yeah, I think she had a family situation pop up, but she has some beautiful wildflower plots that she has been growing up at her farm. And so I'm going to be hopefully working with her to get some good progress photos and maybe a short video to share with everybody at some point in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so next we'll move on to Alice, and she will talk to us about the botanical gardens in Cape Town.
There. Hi, I will zip you across the Atlantic for a switch. I've always wanted to go to South Africa for two reasons. One is because I love to travel, and the second is I love the Mediterranean climate and its flora. And South Africa is one of those 5 regions that have the Mediterranean climate. A trip opportunity came along about a year ago in early November, and it came along with several non-hunting safaris, so I was all in. Cape Town, the gardens are on the west and east side of Cape, where the Indian currents meet the Atlantic currents. So you can see why the climate really supports South African native plants. My slideshow is an overview, and so most of my captions are self-explanatory. So next. We started out in the gardens with a display of the different kinds of plants. Most of them, except for some geranium species, were totally new to the group I was with, including myself. And so we just thoroughly enjoyed it. Had to include it. There was a walk in the garden. You can see that it's somewhat coastal and as well as mountainous. Next. I can't see there it is, exactly. The proteas are what took my eye. We saw so very many of them. It's just, to me, it looked like one of those old-fashioned football chrysanthemums that you might have worn back in the day. But they were everywhere on the heath. They were just phenomenal in many colors. Next. Next. So we get wet and cool, dry and warm. I should go back and say that the protea, there's like protea, that is the national flower, I learned, of South Africa. And but that one only blooms in the winter. We were there in their spring into their summer. Next. I didn't label this one, you know what it is, but I didn't realize that it was a native of South Africa. This is what the game reserve looked like, where the safaris took place. Next. I had never lived in an open air setup before, and this was very interesting. We didn't live here, rather we ate here and socialized. Next. The Jeeps were open. I had friends who asked me, wasn't there a canopy on the top? Wasn't there something on the side? No, ma'am, no, not at all. Next. There's a lioness on the left, and way in the back by the pond, there are a couple of more, and we got up very close to them because they were sleeping. Self-explanatory, very close. Again, next. This was on our way back. Loved the water, the juxtaposition of water, shrubby land forms, plants, and the mountains. These were incredible arrangements of flowers. Again, the natural flowers. It was just, I've only seen something like that in Asia before, never here. Maybe I just don't hang out in the right hotel, so I'm here, stateside. Next. You can see it, quite evidence of Mediterranean climate once again. And home.
Great, thank you. What an adventure.
It was.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
So we have Diana and some cabin photos.
Yes, yeah, this is my husband's and my cabin up on Pilot Mountain in Reiner, Camp Coyote, and it became a weather station in 2018. And it's a shelter, it's a cabin. We have friends that camp out there and, you know, overnight and that. And my husband built the chairs that you see up front. And it's 155 acres of forest. It was logged about 17, 18 years ago. Next. My husband found this paper wasp nest, and he says, gee, I wonder if I can repurpose it and make a mask out of it.
New COVID mask.
A new COVID mask, you know, for the woods type of thing. So he posed for this, and it was quite intact. It was a good find. And our little tree frog, he just showed up one day on the deck and sunning himself, and he just hung out. We took dozens of pictures, and he just sat there. Mushrooms. Oh, I have so many mushrooms. The one on the left was this drippy substance coming down from it. And when I showed it at Mushroom Club, they couldn't quite identify it or find out what the juicy stuff was. And then on the one on the right is another picture. But to take pictures from underneath, it's a whole different world of photography than taking pictures above. Colors are different, textures are different. And so I would encourage anybody to take pictures from below the mushrooms. It's like a selfie, basically. And my little friend, my little walking stick, I have one or two every year, and I never know where I'm going to find them. This is on the back of a chair that my husband made. They can be on the door, they can be on the railing, and he shows up every year for the past 3 or 4 years now. And they're just so interesting to photograph. He just sits there. I can, you know, take pictures for a long time. I have a lot of wild azaleas, and this one happens to be right across from the cabin. And there are several that are in the woods, and I've tried to mark them and flag them so that they don't get trimmed by mistake. And they're beautiful azalea, so I take lots of pictures of them every spring when I see them come up. And in front of the cabin, I have planted bee balm and mint and yarrow. And the bee balm does exceptionally well, and I've had a few hummingbirds visit when I've been sitting on the deck. And of course, the mint, it always smells good, and I have very few mosquitoes. I'm a big mint person, and that around the cabin keeps most of the annoying insects away. And the yarrow grows all over the place, basically up there. These are some of the pictures now from the Moultrie trail cameras. As my husband says, he has an addiction. He has 10, I believe, trail cameras all around the whole property. And this is in the spring, the turkeys with their young decided to walk down from the cabin and pose. There's actually 1, 2, 3 young ones in that. So we get quite a few pictures on this camera. And it's that's a really good camera, Moultrie camera, if everybody wants to buy one. They're very good, but buy a bear box to put them in, because sometimes the bear decides he'd like to play with that or lick it. We have one that we actually have a tooth basically showing on the camera because he decided, oh, maybe I can eat this. So buy a bear box when you buy the cameras, they sell them. And turkeys, this is down the other end of the property, what we call the quarry. It's a very, very rocky area. And the turkeys are in quite abundance, flocks. And some of them actually kind of pose in front of the cameras. They flap their wings, and we've had several. My husband does an iNaturalist count. She posts the picture and actually counts every month how many sightings he has of all these different animals, be it turkey, coyote, fox, bear, the male deers, bobcats. And Fish and Game also uses it for wildlife mapping. You know, basically he does all this for citizen science. Oh, our little friendly bear. Yes, this is probably about a 2-year-old now. It's not the baby bear, and it's not big mama bear, but it's the one in between. And this was an interesting picture because they're timed. The time is stamped on it, and about a minute and a half later, my husband and the dog walked down that same trail. So this bear must have heard them, you know, at the cabin. It's a, you know, it's, oh, I don't know, 150 yards maybe from the cabin. And he scooted just before my husband and the dog came down that same trail, because the camera captured it and it has the time stamped on it as to, you know, when they were both there.
We got pictures of the big one stalking us too on the trails.
Is that it? Oh, okay. Then this is back at my house in Blacksburg. This is not at the cabin, but I did have a monarch caterpillar in the front garden on the milk pods. And it's amazing how many neighbors come by and thank me for having the milkweed and the pods. And I didn't have as many butterfly caterpillars this year as I have in the past, but I do have quite a few plants in my front garden. And of course, when you get milkweed, you get the bugs to go with it, type of thing. They're very, very colorful. So I always try to take a snap picture of them at the same time when I'm out there. This is an interesting spiderweb. I have a azalea bush that's trimmed into a square hedge, like out front where my mailbox is. And one morning we got up and this thing had to be, what, 12 inches, maybe 14 inches across. And you can see kind of in the middle, there was the hole where this big spider came out of. But can you imagine working all night to produce this web? Was just amazing. And there were others. This is the biggest one, but there were others. And when you get a dewy morning, you basically see the dew on it as well. That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. I really appreciate that mushroom selfie tip and the baby turkeys. Last but not least, we have Jordan, and he's going to talk about the digital atlas.
He's the one that's at the herbarium at Tech.
Oh, and am I just supposed to play the video, Jackie? Is that correct?
Yes, the meeting time conflicts with his children's bedtime, so he usually can't make it.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, there he
I'm
is.
Jordan Metzger, curator of the Massey Herbarium here at Virginia Tech. And I wanted to talk to you about the digital atlas of the Virginia flora today. So this website, vaplantatlas.org, is a really helpful resource for identifying or mapping plants when you're out botanizing or exploring here in Virginia. So I'll do a screen share to show it to you here and go through some of the features. So this is the homepage, vaplantatlas.org. Or whoops, now we're on the homepage, vaplantatlas.org. And there's a few ways that you can search this. There's a search box up here where you can put in the genus or the full genus species name for something. Spelling does matter for that. Or you can go down to some of these menus here to see lists or different options. For example, if we click genus, brings up an alphabetical list of all the species by genus and then by species. So we could go down here and look at Acer rubrum. So the red maple record has some photographs of the plant on the right. Not all the records do have photos, but most do. And the big feature is this county map of Virginia. Red dots mean that we have seen the plant, we've documented the plant from that county before and it's native. A blue dot means we've documented the plant from that county and it's introduced. And a gray dot is for a few cases where we're not sure if it's native or introduced. No dot at all means that it's never been recorded from that county. You can also go to this county tab up here. And as an example, we'll go to M and then Montgomery and vascular plants. And this shows you every vascular plant recorded from Montgomery County. So that can be a really helpful thing, especially when you're exploring new areas. I was getting some questions about how to update the atlas. So we'll go over here to this Contribute New Records tab. And it has a lot more details that I'd suggest you check out after this quick video. But the big point is that we need an herbarium sample. So we need a voucher specimen in an herbarium. So if you've taken photos of it, if you've recorded it in your journal, if you've put it on iNaturalist, those are all great ways to document new sightings of a plant in a new county, but they aren't sufficient for the atlas. We need an herbarium sample. So I'll stop the share here and show you this Maidenhair Spleenboard specimen. So this is an example of what I'm talking about with an herbarium sample. So the part with the paper and gluing it down and putting a label on, we can help you with that, or one of the other herbaria in the state might be able to help you with that too. But what we need is the sample from you. So if you can collect it and press it, if you have a plant press, that's great. If it's a small plant, try to get everything from the roots to the fruits. If it's a big tree, try to get the end of a branch with some leaves. And if it's fertile, some flowers or fruits. If you don't have a press or aren't sure how to do that, you can talk to me, or if there's another herbarium near you, you could talk to them, their curator, and see if you could collect the plant and send it in the mail in a Ziploc bag or drop it off here in Daring Hall. But definitely check with us before you do that so we can make sure it gets here safely. But once we have a specimen, we can help with mounting it. We do need some label information. So I'll show you an example of one of our moss specimens. These are kept in little packets like this. And a lot of this information is supplied by the collector. That barcode we'll put on there, but the identification, if you know the plant is a new record for that county, then you should know the species name already. We can help you double check that if needed though. But the location, a verbal description of where you found the plant, and then that's in a geographic sense. So, you know, in Jefferson National Forest, 2 miles off of this road intersection. You can also put down habitat. So if it was found on limestone outcrop that was south facing, you could include information like that. The date, your name as the collector. If you do a lot of collecting, you can include a collector number. We also really appreciate getting GPS coordinates. You can often get those from your phone or from a iNaturalist observation, and we can include those on the label. So this is a very quick video. So hopefully I'll have a chance to record a longer one for the statewide National or Native Plant Society to talk about this in a little more detail. But hopefully this gave you some ideas on how to update the atlas if you're out there finding new records, or just how to use the atlas if you're out exploring plants around Virginia. And my email address is ferns@vt.edu, so ferns@vt.edu if you have any questions. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I think that wraps up our presentation for this evening. Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything else to share?
I just wanted to remind everybody that we have a YouTube channel now, and we're putting our monthly meetings on there. So this will go on maybe sometime this week, Nicole, or whenever you get the time.
Yeah, hopefully by this weekend.
I'd like to say that in January or late February, I'm going to start using it with permission from the Native Plant Society. Request if people would be interested in myself or other people working together to go on private property and take divisions or seeds or of native plants from, so we can put them maybe at Nicole's. I have a bed out in my garden that I've got to do it because it's gotten too shady to grow vegetables. But and the Native Plant Society says you should not plant them direct. I want to put some in Stadium Woods. I've gotten permission from Jamie to do this. But so I'm going to plant them in my yard and get them bulked up, and then from that I can use them at the museum or wherever else. But if we had that place over at, that's a great place that we could possibly do. If the deer don't eat, we have to put fencing over it. But fortunately, I don't have deer in my yard. But anyway, so I'll send out and ask permission from people to go on their property. Maybe Diane's looks like a good one. But anyway, to collect, things so we can get them some local provenance started.
Yeah, I think that's super great. And if we can start to catalog who has local provenance, that would be amazing, because then we know where to go to collect and what is actually from here versus purchased from. I know a lot of Ian's stuff when he was up in Pennsylvania, that's where some of the stuff he grows. And so if we can start to differentiate amongst ourselves, where things have come from and really try and push the propagation of local stuff. I love that, Beth. So if anyone has ideas for record keeping or has those species in their yard to contribute that we can sort of start to divide up. I know Jackie mentioned planting some stuff in her yard that we can propagate from in the future. But I love that, Beth. So thank you for thinking of that and bringing that forward.
Will the chat be coming along with the recording?
We can definitely provide that as well. The questions from the chat, I took a couple notes. I think 2 out of the 3 questions were from Patrick. The first one was for Nicole, asking if the Hale Community Gardens had much deer pressure and whether or not there was fencing. And Carol had also asked where or what is Live Steak Farm?
Oh, sure. So I imagine there is deer there. All the vegetable garden plots are fenced off. So that funds for fencing is included in the grant. And if we don't get the grant, we'll just have to slowly chip away and, you know, grow as much as we can fence at a time and that sort of thing. As far as demonstration gardens, we might want to rely on the expertise in this crowd to find out what is deer proof or has the, or I think it was Barb's idea, just plant extra for the deer. And so there's plenty to go around. But yeah, so that's a really good question about the deer pressure and to find more information about it. So it's sort of at the base of Brush Mountain. I don't know if anybody lives over there and is familiar with the deer populations back in that area. But to move on to the live steak question, so Carol, you might remember Chelsea probably mentioned live steaks last meeting. And so live steaks are a method of propagation, and essentially it's cuttings from mature woody species that you can take in length. And I think the gentleman, did she show a video where he paints one end? And so that's the side that stays up out of the ground, and you usually cut them at a sharp angle. And you can hammer them into riparian areas that will stay moist. And you do that during the dormant season. So you take the cutting, the live steak cutting in the winter, and then you also would plant the cutting anytime in the winter. And so when it breaks dormancy, it's in and hopefully has wet feet and will start to grow roots. And so there's a few select species that do really well with live steaks that will actually root. So buttonbush, willows, elderberry, and there's a few other species that are native to our area that do really well with live steaks. So the idea of a live steak farm is essentially planting a bunch of elderberries in a row. And so if somebody has a creek or a wetland or any sort of wet spot, a rain garden in their yard, they could come easily identify where the elderberries are and take cuttings to go ahead and live steak their yard. And so the farming part essentially just means to grow them in rows to easily be harvested from. And so we would have like a row of elderberries or two, a row of buttonbush where people could come during the dormant season and actually take cuttings to propagate for maybe some of Beth's projects at Depot Park or, a bunch of other places. And so making that available for people to utilize in restoration work, riparian restoration work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
That make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it seems like you naturally addressed the question that Bruce had come up with about asking about the species for live staking. So.
Yeah, and I can share that. Nine bark, great. That is another good live steaks species. I think there's like 5 or 6 natives, and we certainly can try other species as well. But it's more like the woody shrubs, although elderberry is not super woody, but in that sort of realm of plant. And I don't know if anyone's familiar, I'm forgetting what the name of it. There's a willow, and I think it only grows in Floyd in the mountains. And it's a shorter willow that only grows like 4 or 5 feet tall. That does really well with live stakes as well. And so I'd be curious to hear from folks about bringing that down the mountain for some riparian and not just using black willow. Oh, and so that's another one.
Nicole, talk to me, send me an email about that because I might actually have a bucket full of those in my yard right now that I discovered that they can be a little bit damaging to underground piping. And so that's not going to be suitable for near housing where I live, but for other plantings would be
Erosion
great.
control. Yeah.
And we had one more question, one other question that was not addressed naturally by the speaker was from Patrick for Bruce, asking for some more details about the larval environments for some of these fly pollinators, asking whether or not they were solitary and where they went during the larval stages.
Okay, yes. Well, so I wrote him privately, but I'm not, you know, as much as I know that some species do overwinter as larvae. So whatever their larval habitats are, lots of them would be in the soil or compost or leaf litter or areas like that. Also, some do overwinter as adults, and they're going to find places to hide from the cold. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done too on the life cycle of syrphids. Anybody who wants to get into that's wide open.
And I will say, as an entomologist, a lot of fly larvae are very aquatic. So they would actually be under the ice in water, living out the colder months before pupating and then emerging as adults once it gets warmer. And I'm checking the chat, and it looks like we have covered just about all the questions. Is there anybody else?
I might add something. That website I found just recently called In Defense of Plants. It is awesome. And he has articles and he has videos. It's amazing. And one of the articles, I meant to mention it with my talk, is that bumblebees, they did a study with bumblebees. They bite the plant. The queen, when she comes out, she'll bite a plant, and that induces that plant to, because the queen comes out and she needs pollen really bad, and nectar, and that induces the plant to bloom 30 days older, earlier. And so obviously you think, oh, they took tweezers and scissors and cut plants that the bee didn't do, and that only made it go 8 days earlier. So the bee does something with its saliva or something that makes that plant produce blooms earlier. And that was in the defense of plants. That site's got, you get stuck on there. It's awesome. And they have clothes. They have clothes with native plants on them.
Well, I want to thank everybody for attending this December meeting, and I hope to see you in January. It'll be the second Tuesday. It will be a Zoom presentation that was recorded this past summer with one of the other chapters, and it will be on how to use the app of the Flora of Virginia from your phones and that. So I think that'll be a very interesting one too. So I hope everybody has happy and safe holidays then, and we'll see you in another month then. So good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you. Good
Thank
meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Say, great meeting. Thank you for doing hosting duties, Nicole.
Yeah, sorry, no problem. Are you feeling all right?
Yeah, much better.
Oh, good, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it went pretty good. There's some very interesting presentations, so it's great to hear from everybody.
Yeah, and it went a little bit long, but I feel like it was worth it.
Yeah, you know, I feel like anytime I have ever cut anybody off in the past, then people are like, no, that was so good. Why'd you cut them off? So I was nervous to piss anybody off. So I figured just let it ride. But yeah, it's great. Thanks for all your work putting that presentation together. It was really excellent. And I'm going to stop recording now.